All right. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Clash of Cinema. We are back, and this time we're doing something that we haven't done before. We're tackling a blockbuster movie
Yeah,
that is riddled with controversy. So this should be fun.
yeah. I mean, and it's funny because a lot of these are things that usually you've seen and I haven't, but we've both seen this, and we can both kind of like recall maybe the first time we've seen it versus like
Mhm.
rewatching it for the podcast.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's a movie that and I'm sure everybody listening will be familiar with. And I think that anyone that can recall this movie may not remember some of the things that we will bring up that were part of the controversy, some of which has almost completely been erased from history. So, so we'll
Some of it
discuss all that.
definitely.
So
Hmm.
we're discussing the box office hit from 1988, Who Framed Roger Rabbit?
Hmm. Now, was this wasn't the first time, but this was definitely an early uh instance where they blended animation and live action in the in in one medium.
This
Um,
this is the first time they did it like perfectly. I mean, this
okay.
is
Yeah.
because there was movies like in the 70s there was Pete's Dragon, if you remember that
Yeah.
movie. Like in
Cool
the
World.
Cool World came out in the 90s.
Okay. Yeah.
There was like Tom and Jerry Anchors Away, where like Jerry's dancing with Gene Kelly, and like
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
there was a lot of things like that that went on through the years that they always tried to blend it in, but you could kind of tell, it worked for
Mhm.
those times and with the
Mhm.
technology they had. But this was the first time they were really saying we need to make these characters
Mhm.
living, breathing, real live actors. They have to look like
Mhm.
they are part of this world, and they successfully did that.
Yeah.
Unlike any other film before it or after it, I think even Space Jam, like when that
Mhm.
came out in the late, mid to late
Mid
90s,
'90s. Yeah.
that was still pretty good for its time. And but Roger Rabbit did something that no other film ever did, and I think will ever happen again, not on this level, was that
Yeah.
you were blending not only the characters for Disney who produced the film, but
Yeah. Yeah.
Warner Brothers, Fleischer
Mhm.
Studios, like everything that existed in
Yeah.
that time appears in this film. And
I
that
wonder sometimes how they
huge.
get away with like owning this as just Disney without having to constantly pay out the royalties to all these other entities.
The reason that happened is I'll give you there's one name that did it, and that's Steven Spielberg. Because
Uh-oh.
in the mid 1980s, Spielberg was the wonderkind. He was everything
Yeah.
he was producing was gold. I mean, it was a big
Mhm.
box office hit. So everyone wanted in the Spielberg business. Everybody. So when he was not originally attached to produce this film, um, Disney acquired the rights to this film in 1981-ish, right after it got
Mhm.
published. The book got published early, at that time, and they saw this as a great opportunity. So they were actually doing test runs and test things. There's if you go on YouTube, you can search them out. You can see some of the early test footage
Mhm.
of that animation live action blend they were trying. Um, but Spielberg came in a little later because Disney was like, yeah, let's see what we can do. And Spielberg's like, hey, we
Mhm.
need to get all these characters in there. He would call up Warner Brothers and be like, hey, we want to use your characters. He'd call up everybody and they'd be like, we want to use your characters. And they're like, okay. There was always a caveat,
Mhm.
like Warner Brothers, like, well, you could use our characters, but they have to have the exact same screen time as Mickey Mouse, as Donald Duck, as the Disney characters. So they didn't want
Mhm.
to, they didn't want to get shortchanged here. That's why you see
Mhm.
the scene with Mickey and Bugs Bunny together. That's why you see
Yeah.
Donald and Daffy together. So that way they're getting equal screen time. There's no, you know,
Mhm.
disparaging that. I thought that was, to me, just that alone was a
Mhm.
huge boost for this film because it really legitimized that it existed at that time, and that
Right.
Roger was a real character with these characters, because they're all there. They're all
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody that you knew and loved.
Popeye, everybody. I mean, it's so crazy that they were able to pull that off.
Mhm.
And 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 you've never seen that again. Not even a movie. Because I when Warner Brothers wanted to do Space Jam, they actually asked Disney if they could use some of their characters, and Disney said flat out no. And that caused a lot of bad blood since then, that there's been no, they don't want to share those characters. They're very, very
N-
protective of them.
Now, clarify for me if you know, because I can think of one other instance where it happened, but I don't know if it was before or
Mhm.
after. There was that drug PSA that
Yes.
had the cartoon that
Yes,
had
yes,
like
yes.
everybody in it.
Yes.
But was
Just
that
it was
before or
just say
after?
no. That was right about the same time. It was probably
Okay, so they
it
were
might
they
have
were
been it might have been right before, because it might have been 87, 88-ish when that came
okay.
out.
It
Um,
definitely has that same time period vibe.
yeah, because there was like Alf was in it, and like Ghostbusters, real Ghostbusters. Like, yeah,
Hmm.
everybody, Flintstone kids. It was like everybody was in this thing. I remember
Yeah.
when that aired on TV. I think that was more
Hmm.
of a federal thing, because the government
Hmm.
produced that
Yeah.
ad, because that
But
was during
I'm
Nancy
sure for
Reagan's thing.
something like that, everybody wanted to get their hands in it and say, "Oh, well,
Mhm.
we support
Yeah,
the say no."
right. Yes,
Hmm.
we are. Yeah, we're good.
Hmm.
We're not bad. Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
sure, but yeah, that was right around that same time that happened. Um,
Yeah.
Now, some things that are controversial with Roger Rabbit, and this is something that you have to kind of go back into the archives to find this. To like, so some people that are familiar with this, or have seen it since it came out in theaters, will know this. But there's a couple risque scenes that appear in the film right in the very
Hmm.
beginning, right after
Hmm.
Roger comes out of the fridge, and they're going on lunch break, and Baby Herman yells at him. Baby Herman walks under the dress of a woman. Now, in the original version of that, Baby Herman extends his middle finger and puts it up the dress. That was
Hmm.
removed in the current, like, since DVD release has been removed. So if you have the original Laserdisc or VHS, it's still there. So you could pause
Hmm.
and see those moments. There's also a moment where Jessica and Eddie are fleeing Toontown in Benny the Cab, and then he gets dipped, and they go flying
Hmm.
out of the cab. If you
Yeah.
watch, you can see that Jessica's not wearing underwear back in the original version. Now
Yeah.
they've changed that, but she was
Hmm.
not wearing underwear very clearly when you
Hmm.
paused those scenes.
Right.
There's one other scene, and it's very, very quick. I don't know if it's been
Uh-oh.
removed, but I'm pretty sure it has. It's when Eddie is at the Ink and Paint Club, and Betty Boop is serving him. She's talking to him. Her top of her dress falls down for one frame and comes right back up.
Oh.
So her breasts are revealed for a very, very brief moment. I'm pretty sure it's been removed, but that was another one of those moments that the animators were slipping in these like little things to just have a
Yeah.
little fun with what they were
They're
doing.
like PG. What do you mean PG?
Right.
Yeah.
But that's, I mean, there's always those legends of the ones that appear in Aladdin and Lion King and all those things. And that most of it's true, because the animators are just kind of having a little fun, and they want to see what they can throw in to get away with.
Hmm.
And it's really just, that there's the one controversy with the Little Mermaid with the poster, the release
Hmm.
poster, which they've changed. The release poster, the towers of the undersea castle look very phallic, and
Hmm.
that was because apparently that artist had gotten fired from Disney when that was his last project, and that's what he did.
Nice.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
I don't know if that's fully
Yeah, it
true,
could have
but
just been how they looked.
right, 100%. They might have just
Mhm.
thrown him in there. Um,
Yeah.
Now, the movie went through a rigorous process before it got released. It went through at the hands of a few different filmmakers before Robert Zemeckis landed the job. And the casting was crazy. You know who they wanted for the main, like the top pick for Eddie Valiant was
In 1988, man, uh, man, I don't know if I have a good guess for this. I'm gonna go totally silly, and I'm gonna say Jean-Claude Van Damme.
that would be
Yeah.
funny, but no. Harrison Ford was the top pick for
That
this.
actually, I could actually picture him because I mean, like, the film is essentially like a whodunit. It's a like a
Yes,
crime noir set
yes,
against cartoons.
100%.
So
Yes.
he actually looks like he could be, a hard-boiled noir
Well,
detective.
and he was in Blade Runner. I mean, it was
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of that noirish sci-fi noir in that sense.
Mm,
But the reason they didn't use him was because he was too expensive. And they knew the
mm.
animation and everything was going to cost a lot,
It
so they
was
want.
already going to cost, yeah.
But that didn't stop them from trying to get bigger names. So technically, this is around 86 when the casting was taking place.
Hmm.
They went with Chevy Chase was a contender. Bill
Hmm.
Murray, Steven Spielberg was pushing for Bill Murray as one of
Hmm.
the as an Eddie Valiant. And Eddie Murphy was another big contender to play that part. Um,
And I mean, even with like that role being, less prominent, actor wise, I mean, you still got like Tina Turner,
mhm.
for she was Jessica Rabbit, right?
No, no, Kathleen Turner. Kathleen
Oh,
Turner was.
Kathleen Turner, yeah.
Yes, yes.
What else? Christopher Lloyd was the
Christopher Lloyd.
judge.
Not the
I
original
mean,
choice for that either.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be shocked if that was like a Robert Zemeckis pick.
Oh, absolutely. He's
Mhm.
worked with him obviously with Back to the Future, and they've worked many times since. But you know
Mm.
who was the original pick for Judge Doom was Tim Curry, who they deemed, if you'll remember from like Home Alone 2, he was the attendant at the hotel. Um, he was also in Legend, playing
Mhm.
Darkness, which was a very, very devilish character. But they deemed him too scary. They thought he would be too scary for that part, so they
See,
backed off
see,
anyway.
I almost think I would have I'd go the other way on that one because I mean, like the judge character was like serious until he got cartoony,
Yep.
and I don't know that Tim Curry probably could have pulled the judge part off fine, but the cartoony part I don't think I would have been able to, believe for him.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's possible. It'd be neat to see if they actually did some test footage with him to see how
Yeah,
he pulled that part off. But I mean, at this point, though, watching it, I can't see anyone other than Christopher Lloyd playing the judge.
sure.
He's wonderfully villainous in that role. I mean, he's just great in that part.
Yeah.
Same
Did they
same
have
with
any?
same with Bob Hoskins, I would say.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say, did they have any other picks for Kathleen Turner?
That one, no, I don't know if they did or not. That the only thing I've seen in the research was she was really the main voice, and I think it was just that voice she has. She's uncredited in the film, as playing it. She didn't want to have her name in there. She just figured let it kind of Jessica be her own character. So, I mean,
Yeah.
obviously we all know who it is, but Zemeckis had worked with her in 1984's Romancing the Stone, so they had a working relationship as well. So that kind of worked out, in
Yeah.
that sense. But it's funny because like when they talk about like Bill Murray, and I actually spoken to the author of the book, Gary K. Wolf, who had written the original
Yeah.
Who Sent a Roger Rabbit, and he talked about the casting, and he's like, you'd see Bill Murray come in, and he just didn't get it. He didn't understand how he was supposed to interact with nothing until it was
Yeah,
added.
it's hard because I mean, a lot of that was like probably green screen and
Yes.
like
Oh yeah.
imposing the animation,
Yes.
later. So they're just giving you cues for like, hey, this is what the character is saying.
Well, if you go and watch any of the behind the scenes stuff, there's some great specials out there, even on YouTube, you can watch them. But they show, Bob Hoskins miming all this stuff. Like he's grabbing nothing and
Yeah,
pretending
like
he's
like
moving
like when he's
around.
like shaking him and whatever.
Yeah, like he picks him up off the bar top, after he breaks all the
Mhm.
plates. He's holding his ears. He has to, mind that there's nothing really there. They had a dummy rabbit on set that he practiced with. So once he had
Uh-huh.
the sizing and the movements of where his hand placement would be, he'd know where to go. Um,
I kind of noticed that too because it did seem like there were some scenarios where like cartoon characters or things would have been touching him
mhm.
and he didn't really react the same way as he would have like if it was a person there like like at one point Jessica Rabbit's like pressed up against him
Yep, yep.
and it's not that he doesn't react but I think he's like thinking about how to react versus just
Mhm.
reacting.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Of
it's
course. Yeah.
definitely it's not bad but it's definitely like you can tell like hey this is a different sort of working environment than
Yep.
all live action
Yep.
characters or all cartoons.
Yep. Yeah. Like, I mean, just watching some of that behind the scenes stuff with like the scene, one of my favorite scenes in the film is the scene where the weasels come into his office and he's hiding Roger in the
Yeah,
sink.
yeah, yeah,
That
yeah.
whole sequence is so complex because you see
Yeah.
you see these real guns the weasels are holding. He's pulling Roger out of the sink and water's spraying out. So, they got pipes in there that they're using that they pull up that spray the water out. And they've got marionettes holding the guns. So they're guiding those through the scene. And then all the animation has to match those movements later. So
I mean,
it's
that's
quite
amazing that they like were
complex,
able to pull that all off.
quite complex. And the guy that did this, the director of the animation was a man named Richard Williams. And Richard Williams had no animated movie experience. He'd mostly done commercials and some TV specials and things like that. That's really all he
Mm,
had in his belt. He was an expatriate. He moved to England, and that was his thing. He
mm,
was going to do all the work in England, and Disney wanted to use their animators, and Spielberg was pushing for Richard Williams and his guys. So they had to kind of merge those. So a lot of handpicked Disney people went over and worked in Richard Williams' studio to do that. But Richard was very, very adamant about animating those characters at 24 frames per minute to match the movements, to make sure like one of the most infamous scenes that they animated was when they're in that speakeasy in the back of the bar, and
yeah.
he's throwing Roger around, he's moving around, he hits the lamp and the lamp is swinging. There's
Hmm.
a famous term if you're an animator called bumping the lamp. And
Hmm.
that comes from this scene where they hit the lamp and the lamp is swinging. They had, all the shadow is moving, the light and the shadow is moving. And in animation, obviously you're drawing it, so it's not going to have that. So they're like, we have to match that. So it's one of the most complexly animated scenes in history because they had to shadow Roger to match that lamp swing. So anytime there's a complicated animated shot in any movie since then, they call it bumping the lamp, in reference to that. So it's Richard Williams really, really took like stepped up his game and made sure that this movie, like these characters were real and they were living
Yeah.
in that world. And that is visible on that screen completely through.
And it also is reflected like in like in the plot and the story for this because a lot of
Yes.
it is very they sort of mix like fictional characters in studios with like the meta commentary of the real ones. They talk
Mhm.
about Disney and MGM and Warner
Yep.
Brothers, but also like RK Maroon, which
Yep.
I believe was fictional for the film.
Correct. Yes.
Is part of the plot of like,
Mhm.
hey, Roger's been framed for his death, and
Yes.
both him and Jessica are sort of trying to appeal to Bob Hoskins
Hmm.
because he has a history working with Toons. And I
Hmm.
mean, at this point in his career, he's sort of hung that up because you know he he lost he lost his partner to a
Yes.
Toon
His
related
brother.
incident. Oh,
His
his
brother
brother.
was killed by a
Yeah.
tune.
Yes. And so because of that, he's got like animosity
Hmm.
and like
Yep.
on the one hand doesn't really want to help, but at the same time, like that part of him that's like, I can't let this go,
And he's also,
is like, all right,
he needs the money. I mean, he's
he
strapped for
needs the
cash.
money. He needs the money, but I feel like, part of it is just, he probably would have helped even if like the money was on the lower end
Sure.
because
Yeah.
he's just that kind of guy.
I think what happened was being kind of pushed into that world when Rogers, sneaked into his office, brought back, this is what we used to do. All right, I'm going to help you, despite not wanting to, he does. And I think
Yeah.
that's it's really evident too in the scene where he saves him from Judge Doom dipping him in the bar. So at that
Hmm.
moment he's like, we're in this together. I'm going to help you
Yeah.
through. And I think that
Yeah.
that's where, that's Eddie's real character arc starts to really form from, coming away from the alcoholism, the anger he's holding about the death of his brother. All that stuff was resolved for him, which was great. And well,
Yeah.
another interesting controversial voice uh, casting was for Roger itself. I mean, it's in the movie, it's Charles Fleischer, who himself was a method actor. So he was on set doing his lines, reading them to the actors as they played to him, to his.
Mhm.
He wore a costume. He had a full Roger Rabbit costume he wore on set with ears
Nice.
and the suspenders, everything. And he'd be off stage in that costume reading his lines to those actors. He felt he needed it just to feel like he was in that role.
Full method.
Full method on that. And but originally, and this is actually in those test footage that Disney was doing previous to Zemeckis taking over the movie. Paul Rubens was the voice of Roger initially, Pee Wee Herman himself. So
Pee Wee Herman? Yeah,
yes,
okay.
he was supposed to be the voice, and he is. If you watch those test footage videos on YouTube, he's doing the voice in those. So he was initially supposed to do it, and he was interested in continuing, but they went with Charles Fleischer instead. So which is fine, I think, because he did sound very Pee Wee Herman-ish with his voice, but and maybe that would have detracted because at that time Pee Wee was huge. Pee Wee was
Yeah.
apex.
He would have been a less like distinct character because it would have more just felt like a caricature.
Yeah, and I think because no one really knew Fleischer, and Fleischer was doing a completely different voice than his own, it worked really well for kind of pulling you away and suspending that disbelief and that Roger is real in that.
Right.
So I thought that was a great thing. Now there's a lot of differences too between the book and the movie as well. So the book is
Nope.
titled "Who Censored Roger Rabbit?" And the idea that initially came in, which is a great book if you ever get to read it. It focuses on Roger as a comic strip character. So they speak through balloons, like word balloons that come out, and that's how they communicate. They pop out and people read them, and that's how they understand what they're saying. Um, so Roger, and same thing, Roger is in this sense, he's killed in the book, and they have to figure out what happened to him and how he died. Whereas in here, they kind of made him the star, and they framed him in there. Since then, the author
It
took the
probably, I
that
was gonna
story.
say,
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
was just gonna say, it probably would have been harder to translate that to screen, like as a story. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? It probably would have
Oh,
required a lot more animation.
yeah, and I think nowadays they could do it. And since which is kind of cool that the author, as of this year, regained the rights back to Roger Rabbit. So he now owns them
Hmm.
from Disney. So he can make movies, and he's planning on
Hmm.
making movies based on the original book and things like
Hmm.
that. Which now with technology you could easily do that. Um, but the books he wrote after all followed the movie. He kind of took that cue. He still did the comic
Okay.
strip, like where they spoke with balloons and things like that, but he definitely followed like Roger as the star and things like that, and how the censored was actually a like a dream they had about Roger at one point or something. So they kind of play into that and whatnot, but they talk about the movie and all that, and in the books. So they do follow that is. But Disney was very clear they wanted Roger to be the Mickey Mouse of the 1980s when they created it. So that's why they kind of pushed him in there. And plus he got all those shorts that appeared
I
before
remember
films.
seeing a couple of the shorts. I
Mhm.
remember there was the nature one. There was
Yes.
the
Trail mix
hospital
up.
one.
Yep. Tummy trouble.
Yeah, there. Yeah, and then
There's one other one.
there was like an amusement park one.
Yep, Roller Coaster Rabbit. Those are the three. There was a fourth one that was in production that was close to being finished called Hair in My Soup, where Roger was a waiter in a busboy or
It
waiter
would
in
have been good.
a restaurant. Oh, I've seen the cells. It looks hilarious. Like I've seen some stills of it, and it looks great. But that was at a time where Roger himself was kind of in a tug of war because Spielberg owned part of Roger, Disney owned part of Roger. They had to work together to create Roger stuff, any material that went out Roger wise. And because there was a sequel that was in the works. It had been written, there's scripts and stuff that are out there called, it was, I believe, Roger Rabbit 2, Toon Platoon was one of the titles, where he was in World War II. He had to serve during the war. And you learn his father is Bugs Bunny and all this. Like there was all these things that were in there. Um,
I
but
do
that
remember there was a
never happened.
spiritual successor. The heck was it? It was the cartoon. It was a like a Fox 90s cartoon with the Bobcat, who was the police officer, because that ends up
Bonkers,
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 because
which
that ends up dealing with the same Toontown.
it was supposed to be a Roger Rabbit cartoon, but because of
Hmm.
the Spielberg and Disney
They
thing,
made a new
they
character.
they created a whole new character and world where they still use tunes, but it wasn't Roger. It was the whole thing. But yeah,
Yeah.
Bonkers was. supposed to be a Roger Rabbit series on TV.
Hmm.
Which is it would have been great. I would have loved to have seen more Roger than what we got. What we got is fantastic. I'm not complaining, but I would love to have seen just even if it was just more shorts. I would have loved to have
Hmm.
just seen shorts continued through the 90s. Um, because to me that was they were just so much fun to watch themselves. They were just like watching the old Looney Tune cartoons from the 50s and
Hmm.
I loved everything they were doing with Roger and wished they could have done more or would have done more. But now that but hopefully we will see more because now that
Yeah.
Gary Wolf has the rights, he's ready to do more. He wants to do more,
Mm.
and I know he
Well,
has over the years.
that definitely means that when they do something else, we'll have to cover that as well.
Absolutely. Oh, I'd love to watch
Mhm.
all those. Now, did you happen to rewatch any of the shorts that were released?
I didn't rewatch the shorts for this, but I mean I have a decent memory of them. Like I can think about I know the hospital one
Hmm.
deals heavily with Roger kind of chasing after Eddie.
Well,
It's actually being a baby
Baby Herman swallows a rattle,
or baby Herman. I'm sorry.
and
Yeah.
he has to take him to the hospital to get the rattle out. That's the whole
Yeah.
thing. But then obviously mayhem ensues because Roger gets thrown into
Yeah.
an operating room and all of this stuff happens
Yeah.
and then finally they get the rattle out and Roger swallows it. It's like and then it becomes a whole thing and then he finally gets it out and then Baby Heron at the very end swallows it again and it's the end. But it's just it was a lot of fun to watch. But that has again, if you watch it, there's a little cameo from the movie of Droopy again
Mhm.
operating an elevator in this one and so Droopy is not a Disney character. He was owned by MGM and then Warner Brothers.
GM. Yeah.
And Warner Brothers picked him up at that time because he was part of the Tom and Jerry family.
Yeah, oh yeah, I
Which
remember he was in Tom and Jerry Kids.
yes, yep, because yeah, and
Mhm.
he's now Warner Brothers does own that character, but again, they had to get that character from another studio
Mhm.
and use him. And I think at that time when they were making those shorts, he was owned by um, Warner Brothers, so they were still allowed to use a character,
Mhm.
in those shorts, and he appears in all of the shorts. Um, he's the
I
only
remember
outside character.
specifically. Yeah, I was gonna say I remember specifically in the roller coaster one. At one point, he has Jessica tied up on the
Yes.
tracks, and he's kind of being dastardly,
Yep.
and Roger and Baby Herman are in a roller coaster cart that's like rolling
Yep.
past, it's almost falling apart, and they somersault over Jessica,
Yep.
and Droopy looks at the Droopy's like Drat's foiled again, even though like he didn't do anything. And
Right.
Baby Herman actually looks and does like a fourth wall break, and he looks at like us, like, huh?
Yeah. 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 Oh, yeah. No, wonderful stuff. I mean, they always had fun with that. And I think
Yeah,
I wish they'd finish that last short and give us some more of those.
yeah,
Hopefully one day, something will come out of that. Much like the
mhm.
controversy of Batgirl movie and Acme versus Coyote, these movies that are shelved that we haven't seen yet. Hopefully some of these
Well,
things will
that
fall
one,
into
I
way.
was gonna say, I don't know if you heard about that one. So there
Yeah.
was there was another Looney Tunes movie because HBO had been doing
Yes.
like their little reboot, and they had that Porky and
The Day the
Daphne
Earth Blew
movie.
Up, which is fabulous,
Yeah.
by the way.
So that was one that was also shelved, and a
Hmm.
company acquired it and
Ketchup.
put it out.
Ketchup
Yep. And
Entertainment. Yep.
Ketchup has also acquired
Yes.
Coyote versus Acme, so that should
Which
be
I
coming out I think
cannot
this
wait for.
year.
Which is a
Yeah.
live action animated mix, which
Yeah.
I'm very
Yeah.
excited to see how they do that and how well it kind of
Yeah.
holds up to that
Yeah.
Looney Tune
What's the
standard,
20?
but Roger
Yeah.
Rabbit, love.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah. So now, speaking of like, okay, so the movie itself, obviously, there's a lot of in jokes. There's a lot of references to old animation, things like that from the 40s, where it takes place. So, being a kid at that time when I first saw it, I went and saw it in theaters. I saw it 3 times that summer.
Mm.
Because I just loved it so much. I would go like I'd have my parents drop me off at the mall. This was back in the day when you could do this. I
Oi.
was, drop me off at the mall. I'd go to the movies by myself, and then my dad would pick me up on his way out of work. So I time it with that. This was, at a time when you could do those things. I was how old? God, I would have been 14, 13, 14 at the time when it came out. So yeah, I would go. I went and saw it 3 times. It was I loved it, loved it, and it was to me this really beautiful love letter to just animation, the golden age of animation, if you will. And it, it is something, and I think that's the one thing I loved about that the book wasn't able to really touch on because the book wasn't, wasn't thinking about that. It was a different
Mhm.
way to tell a story, but this one really said, "Hey, let's do something that has never been done before in a way that's just never been done before, or in to some degree since, where we got to see that mix and just love of that. I think though I will say, like, I don't know if you've seen The Day the Earth Blew Up,
I
that
did.
19
Yeah, no, I enjoyed it. It's
that
it's
that
that whole wave
touched
of HBO.
that touched on the that love of golden age animation beautifully.
Yeah.
What a it was fabulous. I loved what they did with that. How
I
could
will
you
say that
shelf that?
that well, because it was stupid tax dodge reasons because they're like,
Right.
oh well, we make more money not putting it out than putting it out.
Right.
But that whole era of HBO Looney Tunes, because it ran for like 5 or 6 seasons
Hmm.
as sort of like an HBO Max original.
Yes. Yes.
All of those harken back to the like Merry Melodies Looney Tunes stuff, and
Right.
I will say that those are my favorite iteration of Looney Tunes
Hmm.
since the originals.
I
Like they've
agree.
tried a couple times, and I feel like it's usually kind of a miss. And that was just
It
like, you know
is.
what? We're gonna go back to what worked.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know we're off topic a bit, but still kind of on top. But like, yeah, if you look at like what is it, Looney Tunes, there was a Looney Tunes show where it was kind of a sitcom based. They lived in a suburban neighborhood and this and that.
Yeah.
It has funny moments, but it certainly wasn't as great as what they were doing back in the original show. So
Hmm.
going back to that with the newer ones was definitely perfect. I mean,
Hmm.
I enjoyed what they did with that stuff. And I hope we see more of these sorts of movies released,
Hmm.
especially now with, even if they're under the Roger Rabbit banner, let's see something, like that come out that's just,
Hmm.
it's just hilarious, fun, and just filled with mayhem. That's what I love about it. Now,
Yeah.
interestingly enough, Roger Rabbit was is considered an animated movie. It's not considered live action
Hmm.
because more than 50% of the movie has been animated or contains animation in it. So it's considered more an animated film than that. So when it came to Oscar time, animated films were not considered um, legitimate best picture options. So it
Hmm.
didn't really get a lot of stuff from that. So it lost a little bit, in that sense, which I think it deserved to be considered at least for that.
Considered.
It did get, all those special recognition Oscars for effects and animation and whatnot, but
Yeah.
definitely deserved more. This was before they started doing best animated feature, which didn't start till the
Yeah. Yeah.
2000s. It would have definitely bagged for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think people knew what to do with it. And Disney was a little bit hesitant on it when they first got the rights to this, because it fit into their kind of model at the time. When they were seeing the initial drawings and preliminary footage of Jessica Rabbit, they're like, this is too racy for us. So they had to move it under their Touchstone Picture banner,
Mm.
because that was for their more adult type of material. Um, and the same thing happened to Tim Burton's Nightmare Before Christmas. That initially was, Disney was producing it. They put it under Touchstone. Now it's under Disney. If you
Yeah.
walk to the
Yeah.
house, Disney Castle front. When it came out in theaters and I saw it, it was Touchstone Pictures. Because
Yeah.
again,
Oh, no, it took forever to get the branding.
yeah, they just they didn't know what to do with it. And I think that's kind of the way they felt about Roger. They knew they wanted Roger as a big, it was going to be a big movie. It was going to be a moneymaker because they had Spielberg attached and all this stuff. But they didn't want it to tarnish their Disney reputation as a
Which is
squeaky
ironic
clean.
because it still has Disney characters in it, so
Right.
people aren't really going to care that they don't see the castle. They'll make the association.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. Yeah. So it's kind of funny how the studio brass will be a little bit standoffish, but it's clearly there. People are going to identify it with that regardless.
Mm.
But that, yeah, those sequences with Jessica were always a little bit Like they were always a little hesitant on how racy they made her. Because they, but that's how she's described in the book. She's very curvaceous, buxom redhead. And she was just this thing that artists created just as this sort of release of the perfect woman that they guess they wanted to, make. And that was the idea, was she's just this overtly sexy animated character that just doesn't fit into that zany, Looney Tunes-ish type of world. So here she
Mhm.
is singing at an ink and paint club and doing those sorts of things, because that's what she's there for. She's there to entertain the men. Um,
Mhm.
that ape too, the ape that you see at the ink and paint club was he's another character. His name is Bongo. He was an older kind of like I don't know if he's Fleischer or somebody, but he was in another studio stuff that um, he was used from as well. So he wasn't created for the movie directly.
Mhm.
Um, some other scenes too. There's scenes that are cut. If you do have the DVD or the Blu-ray, they do put those in there. That you can watch them. But there's a sequence where Eddie returns to, like, right after he leaves Dolores, and he goes back to the office, and then you see him coming out of the shower. That's where it jumps to. In between there's a whole scene. He goes back to the Ink and Paint Club and he breaks into Jessica's dressing room. And he's going through there. When he gets in there, he gets conked on the head. And when he wakes up, he's surrounded by the Weasels, Judge Doom, Jessica, and they're like, it appears like Jessica's working with Doom at this point. So they
Mhm.
say, we're going to take him to Toontown. What are we going to do with him? Let's, I think they call it something like toonize him or something like that. But they put a painted pig head over him, like a toon pig head mask over his face. And he's Toonarooned, he called it. So he gets thrown out of Toontown, and then he goes back to his office and he's washing it off with dip. And you see like
Mhm.
the pig go down the drain, and that's when he comes out and Jessica's there kind of pleading her
Mhm.
case, saying, I'm not, I love my husband, blah blah blah. So it's a really important. I guess it's not important to the story, but I thought it was a really great scene that kind of pushes her character into that sort of questionable area. Because even when you're in Toontown, he's, she's got the gun, and he's
Yeah, I
like,
was gonna
drop it,
say. I mean,
lady.
you're already like sort of like unclear about her
Mhm.
motivation.
Yep.
So I mean, that scene sounds like it just sort of muddies the water more.
Yeah, it did. I mean, it probably just slowed it down at that point, and that's why they're like, let's just keep the story going. And I get completely why they took it out, but that is a sequence that's there. There's a couple other ones that they added. Now, originally there were supposed to be seven weasels, because they wanted to match the seven dwarfs, but they cut out a couple because they thought that was too many to animate. They figured they kept it at the five that they left in there. But so certain things that they thought about. There is a
Yeah.
lot. If you go online too, there's a lot about the little red shoe that gets dipped by Judge Doom. Like
Oh,
justice for the shoe, because
oh
people
my God.
people have felt like he was wrongfully and just menacingly just erased from
Hating on
existence.
shoes.
So he was just an innocent little shoe bouncing around that Judge Doom just
Mhm.
eradicated from existence at that moment. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that's in the dip, which is the turpentine acetate benzene mix, was the stuff that animators used to clean off cells when they were finished with it. So it was a
Based
legitimate
on like a legitimate thing. Yeah.
yep. So they were using that sort of thing, but the movie itself. I don't know if you have any last minute thoughts on this, but I think we've touched on a lot of the interesting
Hmm.
controversies that surrounded this huge moneymaker for
Hmm.
Disney in 1988, who Disney at the time was kind of struggling, um, because their animated movies weren't really hitting well. One that I would love to hit on and talk about on this is the Black Cauldron was one that was not a big hit. The Great Mouse Detective. These were movies that were coming out, and they weren't really doing like the big stuff that the originals were, and it was kind of it
Yeah.
was Disney's dark period, they called it. This was a movie that
Or
lifted it a lot.
yeah. Yeah.
Um, but obviously, I mean, recommendation wise, you would sure recommend the movie to anybody that hasn't
Oh,
seen it yet.
oh, definitely. I mean, I would 100% say. I mean, it's hard. It's hard probably to recommend it to people, growing up now. have today when I watch this. I mean, I think it's wonderful, but it's there's probably a right demographic, and then there's probably a group of people that are gonna just go, what is this? Is this like
Yeah.
AI jumbled a bunch of characters together? And we're like, no, this was real
Right.
people trying to jumble characters together.
Yeah.
So
I guess I mean maybe it's not it won't hold as much
mhm,
meaning with like the Looney Tunes characters because if you didn't grow up with them,
mhm.
you might not have as clear like connection with them. I mean, Space Jam has always been there and things like that.
Sure,
And if you have access to the originals here and there, but when I was a kid, they were on every Saturday morning. They were constantly
sure.
airing all the time.
Yeah,
So to us, it was like you were like, wow, there's Bugs Bunny. There's, you loved him as
yeah.
much as anything else. And it was Mel Blanc and Mel Blanc doing his last performance of
I
Bugs
love Mel
Bunny.
Blanc.
Who, this was one of his
Yeah.
his final things
Mhm.
before he passed away in 88, I believe he passed away.
I
So
I I straddle the two worlds because I mean I grew up with the all the Looney Tunes in syndication, and
mhm.
then lived
Yep.
through Tiny Toons.
Yep.
So I
Oh,
have
which I
like
love Tiny Toons.
both of those to like kind of compare against.
Yep. Yep. And they've
So
relaunched Tiny Toons recently, which has been okay.
yeah, it was okay. It didn't
Not as
last.
great. Not as great as the original. The
Mhm.
original was really again love letter to those original Looney characters and that sort of manic
Well, yeah, and that was definitely
comedy.
like another like feather in Steven Spielberg's cap because
Yep.
he was featured prominently slash like that was his brainchild.
He could use the word tune. That's why they could use it because it was, a Warner Brothers product, but they could use the word tune. It wasn't,
That's true.
you couldn't, it wasn't owned by Disney at that point because
Yeah,
of that Spielberg connection. He could use the word
yeah,
Tiny Toon. Uh,
mm,
so again, yeah, there was a lot that probably could have
mhm,
happened if the relationship was a little bit more, you know,
mhm.
I guess nurtured in some way. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I guess I again, yeah, I'd highly recommend it. If you're a fan of animation in general, it's a wonderful film just to see the remarkable work that went into
Yeah.
making these characters real. And you watch it even today, these characters are living, breathing characters. They're alive in that world, and that's the most beautiful
Mhm.
part of it. And I think that just from that perspective, and in a world nowadays where 2D animation is really kind of an archaic practice. I mean, it's done, but it's done with computers. I mean, this was all done by hand and paints and incredible amount of work that went into just creating the world that they made is just worth that watch. And the story is wonderful. What it was great about it is it was great for kids and it was great for adults. There was enough in there for adults to follow a really it's a pretty intense, in-depth mystery. Um,
Mhm.
and for us, it was just fun to see the characters just involved in a real world situation. And, I
Mhm.
loved it. I thought that it's still to this day my favorite animated film. I would watch it
I,
any
I
day.
would definitely I would definitely put it up there. I mean, like the problem is there is some great
Oh,
animation
there
out there
is.
that
There is.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, I
I
mean,
mean,
and
I don't
even
know if they
this,
all have controversy, so I don't know if we could talk about them all, but there are
there,
definitely some great ones.
there are great ones and modern day ones. I mean, whether you're talking a Pixar film or Illumination or whatever, or even like indie things like Flow or stuff like
Oh,
that.
oh,
Which is a beautiful animated film. But their animation is just I love animation. I love that medium, and I think this one just really took it and embraced it and made one of the greatest films of all time. I mean, it's just a wonderful film.
sure,
So, but yeah, well, there
definitely.
you go. There is us hitting our first blockbuster in controversy. Um, so
Nice.
yeah,
We
yeah,
love it.
good one to hit too. And a movie that really you look at back on, you're like, wow, it really had a lot going on in there that took it. I mean, it took it almost 7 years from Disney's acquisition to finally getting it into theaters, which is
Yeah.
quite a journey
Yeah. I
to
mean,
do that.
back then, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So a lot of money went into that, just in the test stuff all the way to the final release of that. I know Disney was, oh, let me add one thing too. This is a very fascinating fact about it. The Looney Tunes characters When Warner Brothers agreed to it, they said they have to look like the modern style that we were using in the 1980s. But everybody's like, no, this is taking place in the 1940s. They got to look like the Bob Clampett stuff. So they were doing for Warner Brothers, they would animate it in the modern style and show it to them, while this they would reanimate it in the Bob Clampett style for the movie. So they
Oh,
double animated all the
oh boy.
Looney Tune character scenes just to appease Warner Brothers. And when they released it, they didn't say anything to the Warner Brothers execs that they changed it, and no one noticed that. It just went completely
Oh
by,
boy.
and it's there. So the versions you see in the movie are the actual versions that were around in the 1940s, the way they looked in the 40s.
Right.
But
Right.
Warner Brothers didn't want them to look that way. But they were able to sneak it in there. So an interesting little tidbit there to end on. Um, all
Definitely.
right, all right. So yeah, so we're there. You go, Roger Rabbit. Check it out if you've never seen it. We will
Hmm.
be back with another controversial film for the next time around. We'll have to pick what we're going to next.
Definitely.
All right. Any last words?
See you on the next one.
Yep. See you in the movies.